They say love is the most beautiful feeling in the world. It gives you strength. It gives you purpose. It makes life worth living. Love can make ordinary days feel magical. It can turn the simplest moments into memories you carry forever. A smile across the table, a hand reaching for yours, a voice saying, "I'm here for you." But what if that love you believed in was nothing but a lie? What if every smile, every touch, every word you held on to with all your heart was nothing more than a carefully crafted mask? What if the person you trusted the most was the one deceiving you the entire time? That is my story, a story of blind trust, crushing betrayal, and a revenge that shook everything. He pretended to love me, but in the end, my revenge revealed the truth he could never hide again. When I look back now, I wonder, how did I not see it? How did I not notice the cracks, the shadows, the lies hidden between his words? But that's the thing about love. It blinds you. It softens the sharp edges of doubt, silences the voice of reason. You want to believe. You want to trust, and so you close your eyes to the truth staring right at you. At first, it felt like destiny, like the universe had finally decided to give me my share of happiness. He appeared in my life at a time when I was vulnerable, when I needed comfort, when I longed for someone to understand me, and he played his role perfectly. He listened, he cared. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know then that every word was calculated, every gesture rehearsed, every promise empty. To me, he was my safe place. To him, I was nothing more than a game, you see. Betrayal never announces itself. It doesn't come with flashing signs or loud warnings. It slips in quietly, wrapped in tenderness disguised as affection. It waits until your guard is down, until your heart is wide open, and only then does it strike. When he smiled at me, I thought it was love. When he held me close, I thought it was forever. When he whispered those 3 words, "I love you," I thought it was the truth. But what I didn't realize was that love doesn't hide secrets, love doesn't lie, love doesn't destroy. And the man standing beside me wasn't a lover. He was an actor playing the role of the perfect partner. While writing a script I didn't even know I was part of, people often ask, how does betrayal feel? It feels like the ground disappearing beneath your feet, like your chest caving in while you're still trying to breathe, like your entire world shattering in a single moment. But the worst part? It's not just losing the person you loved, it's realizing that the person you loved never even existed, because the version of him I held in my heart, the version that loved me, cared for me, wanted a future with me, was nothing but a character he created. The real man? I never knew him, not until it was too late. Sometimes late at night, I replay those moments in my mind. The first time he said he loved me. The first time he promised, "I'll never hurt you." The first time I believed that maybe, just maybe, this was the love that would last. I replay those memories, not because I miss him, but because I wonder how I could have been so blind. How could I not see the insincerity in his eyes? How could I not hear the emptiness in his voice? The answer is simple: because I wanted to believe, because I was desperate for it to be real. And that's how betrayal works. It feeds on your hope. It thrives on your trust. It survives because you refuse to accept the possibility that the person you love is capable of such cruelty. But here's the thing. Betrayal doesn't just break you. It changes you. It turns the softest parts of you into something sharper, stronger. At first I was shattered. I was drowning in disbelief, in pain and humiliation, but slowly, that pain hardened into something else, into fire, into strength, into resolve. And from that fire, a plan was born. Because if he thought he could play with my heart and walk away untouched, he was wrong. If he thought his lies would remain hidden forever, he was wrong. If he thought I would remain silent, broken, defeated, he was wrong. My silence was never weakness, it was strategy. And when the time came, my revenge revealed the truth he fought so hard to bury. So if you're listening to this, let my story be your warning. Love is beautiful, yes, but love without honesty, without loyalty, without truth, is nothing but poison dressed as a gift. The one who smiles the sweetest may be the one hiding the deepest deception. The one who promises forever may already be planning their exit, and the one who says, "Trust me," may be the very one who betrays you. He pretended to love me, but his lies couldn't survive forever. The truth has a way of clawing its way out. And when it did, it destroyed everything he had built. That's how my story begins, with blind trust, with cruel betrayal, and with a revenge so sharp. It cut through every mask he ever wore, because in the end, the truth always comes out, always. When I first met Daniel, he seemed like everything I had ever dreamed of. Kind, charming, attentive. He wasn't flashy or loud. He had this quiet confidence, the kind that made you feel safe without even realizing why. And when he looked at me, it felt like I was the only person in the room. The little things. That's what made him stand out. The way he noticed I always tapped my fingers when I was nervous. The way he remembered how I liked my coffee, not too sweet, just enough cream. The way he laughed at my silly jokes, not because they were funny, but because he wanted me to feel heard. He made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible. And for a woman who had spent years feeling overlooked, that feeling was intoxicating. At first it was simple. A coffee here, a walk in the park there, conversations that stretched late into the night, where time disappeared and nothing else mattered. Daniel was thoughtful in ways I wasn't used to. He asked about my dreams, my fears, my childhood memories, and when I spoke, he listened, really listened, like every word I said was a secret worth keeping. That was the thing about him. He made me believe I was special, and soon, I began to imagine a life with him. Not just the dates or the moments we shared, but the future and birthdays, anniversaries, maybe even a family. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. Everyone around us admired what we had. Friends said we were the perfect couple, the kind of pair that others secretly envied. When we walked into a room, people noticed. My mother, oh, she adored him. Every time his name came up, her face lit with relief. Like her prayers had finally been answered, she would say, "Hold on to this one. He's different. He's the kind of man who will take care of you." Even strangers noticed. The way he held the door for me, the way he looked at me like I was his whole world, the way our hands fit together as if they were always meant to. To anyone watching, our love was picture perfect. To me, it felt like a fairy tale finally coming true. But fairy tales, they often have shadows lurking in the corners, and mine was no different. Looking back, there were moments, tiny ones, that should have made me question. But when you're in love, you don't see them for what they are. You brush them off, convinced they're nothing. Like the time he disappeared for hours without a word. When he finally returned, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and said he'd been busy with work. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Or the time his phone lit up late at night and he quickly turned it face down. He laughed it off, saying, "Just my boss," stressing me out again. And I let it go. Because love makes excuses where there should be questions. Daniel wasn't just my boyfriend. He became my safe place. My hope. My world. When life was heavy, he was the one I leaned on. When I doubted myself, he was the one reminding me that I was enough. He made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. And so, I trusted him completely. I handed him my heart without hesitation. I built my dreams around him. But what I didn't know was that he was building something very different. It's strange how love blinds you. You can be standing right in front of the truth and still not see it. You can hear the cracks in the story, but convince yourself it's nothing, because the thought of losing the person you love feels worse than ignoring the truth about them. Daniel was warm, affectionate, attentive, but behind that warmth, something darker was hiding, something I couldn't see, because I refused to look. If I had been wiser, maybe I would have caught the signs. Maybe I would have questioned why he was sometimes too perfect, too rehearsed. Maybe I would have asked myself why someone who claimed to love me so much occasionally felt distant, like his heart was elsewhere. But I didn't. I chose to believe. I chose to close my eyes to anything that threatened the happiness I thought I had found. Because the truth is, we don't just fall in love with a person. We fall in love with the story we create around them. And I had written Daniel into the story of my forever. Friends envied us. Family admired us. And I was lost in a dream, but dreams have a way of ending. And sometimes, they end in the most painful way possible. Because behind his smile was deception. Behind his tenderness was betrayal. Behind his promises was a plan I wasn't yet aware of, and while I floated on the high of what I thought was true love, Daniel was already writing a different ending to our story. I just didn't know it yet. Yes, in the beginning it was perfect, or at least, it looked perfect. He was the man everyone wished for, the partner every woman envied, the soulmate I believed I had finally found. But beneath that perfect surface lay the cracks of a truth I couldn't yet see, and soon, those cracks would widen, they would grow too big to ignore, they would destroy the picture I had painted in my heart. Because love, real love, doesn't hide in shadows, it doesn't deceive, it doesn't wear a mask, and Daniel, he was nothing but a mask. At first the changes were small, so small. I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. The late-night phone calls he wouldn't explain, the sudden trips out of town, always for work, the little lies that didn't quite add up, but were smoothed over with a smile and a kiss. I told myself, it's nothing. Don't overthink. He loves you. Because that's what we do when we're in love. We silence our doubts. We ignore the red flags. We choose comfort over truth. I wanted to believe in him so badly that I became my own enemy. Every time my instincts whispered, something's wrong, I shut them down with excuses. He's just tired. He's stressed. He needs space. That's normal in a relationship. But the truth, it wasn't normal. And the deeper I sank into denial, the closer I came to the heartbreak waiting just around the corner. The first real crack appeared one quiet evening. We were at home, sitting together on the couch. He was scrolling on his phone while I was half watching a movie, my head resting against his shoulder. Then it happened. His phone buzzed. And for once, he didn't snatch it up quickly. It sat there face up, glowing on the table, and that's when I saw it. The name flashing on the screen wasn't mine, but hers. The message lit up like fire against my eyes. Can't wait to see you again. My heart stopped. The room went silent. I couldn't even hear the sound of the movie anymore. It was as if the world itself had paused, waiting for me to react. In that moment, 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind. Maybe it's his sister. Maybe it's a coworker joking around. Maybe it's nothing. I wanted to believe it was innocent. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some excuse, some story that could make the ache in my chest go away. But deep down, I already knew the man who promised forever was living a double life. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there frozen, pretending I hadn't seen anything while inside. My heart was unraveling thread by thread. He noticed nothing, or maybe he noticed everything and simply didn't care. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye as he left for work, and I smiled back at him with shaking lips. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It forces you to live in two worlds at once. On the outside, you wear the mask of the happy partner. On the inside, you drown in suspicion, pain, and fear. The cracks began to spread. He grew more distant, though he tried to hide it. Phone always on silent, always face down, conversations shorter, excuses longer. He still said, I love you. But those words felt different now, like they weren't meant for me anymore, and I became someone I didn't recognize. Checking his pockets when he wasn't looking, scrolling through our call logs, listening for clues in his tone, in his words, in his absence. It was exhausting, living in love and in doubt at the same time, loving a man who might already belong to someone else. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth. No more lies. No more excuses. He came home late, claiming he had been working late at the office. But something inside me snapped. I asked him directly, Daniel, is there someone else? The question hung heavy in the air. He froze, then laughed. He brushed it off, calling me paranoid, accused me of being insecure. of imagining things. He even turned it around, making me feel guilty for doubting him. And the worst part? I believed him for a while. Because when you love someone, you want to believe their lies more than you want to face the truth. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Days later, I saw it again, the message tone, the way his eyes lit up when her name appeared, and suddenly, everything added up. The late-night calls, the sudden trips, the lies dressed up as explanations, all the puzzle pieces locked into place, and the picture they formed was devastating. I remember staring at him across the dinner table, studying his face, wondering how he could sit there and smile at me while betraying me so deeply. How could he pretend so easily? How could he look me in the eyes and say, "I love you," knowing he was saying the same words to someone else? That's when I realized he wasn't just lying, he was living two lives, and I was nothing more than a background character in his game. The weight of it was crushing. Every memory we shared felt poisoned. Every promise he made felt broken. Every forever, he whispered, felt like a cruel joke, and yet I stayed. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to be sure. I needed undeniable proof before I could walk away. I needed him to reveal himself fully, so there would be no doubt left in my heart. Because when you love someone that much, letting go isn't just hard. It feels impossible, so I waited. I watched, I listened, and slowly his mask began to slip. The excuses became lazier, the lies less convincing, the warmth in his eyes colder, until one day, there was no denying it anymore. Daniel, the man I thought was my soulmate, was a stranger who smiled at me while giving his heart to someone else. That's when the conflict inside me truly began. Do I confront him? Do I walk away quietly, or do I make him regret underestimating me? The battle between love and anger raged within me. The part of me that still loved him begged for an explanation, a reason, a way to fix what was broken. But the part of me that saw the truth, the part of me that knew I deserved better, was beginning to wake up, and with every lie he told, with every secret he kept, with every smile he gave to someone else, that part of me grew stronger, the part of me that wanted revenge, because sometimes love doesn't just fade, sometimes it transforms, from trust into suspicion, from passion into fury, from devotion into vengeance. Had given him my heart, and he had shattered it without a second thought, but he didn't know yet that in breaking me he had also created something far more dangerous, a woman who had nothing left to lose. The truth came crashing down one rainy night, a night I will never forget. The sky was heavy with storm clouds. Raindrops tapped against my window, each one echoing the unease pounding in my chest. Something inside me told me not to trust him. Not tonight. He had said he was going to work late. Again. But my instinct screamed louder than his excuses. So I followed him. Yes. I followed the man I loved, the man I trusted with everything. The city streets glistened with rain, lights reflecting off the wet pavement like broken shards of glass. I trailed his car at a careful distance, my heart thudding harder with every turn he took, and then he stopped. Not at the office, not at a meeting, but at a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street. I parked far enough not to be noticed, but close enough to see through the glass window. And what I saw burned itself into my memory, searing my soul with a pain I cannot put into words. There he was. Daniel. Q4. Man who whispered promises of forever into my ear, sitting across from her. Her hair fell over her shoulders as she laughed at something he said, and he was holding her hand, with the same tenderness he once showed me, smiling at her. The same smile that used to make me feel like I was the only woman in the world. I froze. It felt like time itself had stopped. The rain blurred my vision, but it wasn't the storm outside, it was the storm inside me. My chest tightened. My breath caught. I couldn't move, because in that single moment, everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down. He wasn't just lying. He wasn't just cheating. He was pretending to love me, while giving his heart to someone else, pretending to be mine, while living a life I wasn't part of. I stood there, staring through that glass window, watching my entire world unravel. The man who once kissed me with passion now leaned toward her with the same fire in his eyes. The man who held me when I cried now brushed her cheek with the back of his hand. Tender and soft. Everything inside me shattered. It's hard to explain betrayal in words. It doesn't just hurt. It destroys you. It rips apart your trust, your memories, your very sense of reality. It makes you question every moment. Every word, every smile, was it ever real? Or was I living in a lie all along? As I stood there in the rain, I felt destroyed, but I also felt something else, something darker, something stronger. A fire, a storm rising within me. At first, the fire was grief. Tears streamed down my face, blending with the rain as I struggled to breathe. I wanted to run inside, scream, demand answers, tear away the lies, but I didn't, I couldn't. Because as much as it hurt, I needed to see, I needed to know, I needed the truth carved into my memory so deep that I could never again deny. So I watched. I watched the man I loved become a stranger before my eyes. I watched him hold her hand the way he used to hold mine. I watched him laugh, not with me, but with her. And with every second that passed, the grief inside me hardened into something unshakable. Resolve. By the time he leaned across the table and kissed her, the pain inside me had transformed. No longer just heartbreak, no longer just sadness, but rage. He thought he could deceive me. He thought he could live a double life, keeping me in the shadows while he shared his light with her. He thought I would never know, but he was wrong. That night, in the rain, I swore something to myself. I swore he would regret the day he thought he could play with my heart. I swore his lies would not remain hidden forever. I swore the mask he wore would fall, and when it did, everyone would see the truth. I drove home that night with trembling hands gripping the wheel. My tears had dried, replaced with a strange calmness. The kind of calm that comes before a storm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from fury waiting to strike. When he finally returned later that night, dripping wet from the rain, he smiled at me, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just destroyed me hours earlier. He wrapped his arms around me, kissed my forehead, whispered, "Sorry I'm late. Love." And I smiled back. Yes, I smiled. Because that's when I knew. The game had changed. He thought he was the only one wearing a mask. But now, so was I. For the days that followed, I played my part. I laughed when he joked. I held his hand in public. I said, "I love you," and pretended I still believed his lies. But inside, I was no longer the same inside. I was planning, waiting, watching. The woman he thought he could manipulate was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone stronger, someone who would make him pay for every tear, every sleepless night, every broken promise. You see, betrayal doesn't just end love, it transforms it. It takes devotion and turns it into fury. It takes tenderness and turns it into steel. It takes silence and turns it into strategy. And I had a strategy, because I realized something that night. Revenge isn't about screaming or fighting. It's about patience. It's about knowing the truth and waiting for the right moment to reveal it. So I waited. I gathered strength. I let him dig his own grave, lie after lie, betrayal after betrayal. And when the time came, I would strike. That rainy night marked the death of the woman who loved blindly, and the birth of the woman who would not be broken. Daniel thought he had me fooled. He thought he was winning, but he didn't know that by betraying me, he had awakened something he could never control. A storm, a fire, a vengeance that would not rest until the mask he wore was torn away for the world to see. Yes, that was the night the mask fell off, not just his, but mine too. He revealed who he truly was, a liar, a pretender, a man living two lives, and I revealed who I had become, a woman who would no longer be silent, no longer be fooled, no longer be weak. That night didn't just end my love story, it began my revenge story, and soon, Daniel would realize that betraying me was the biggest mistake of his life. Revenge isn't a shout in the street. It isn't a scene of chaos. Revenge isn't about raw anger alone, but it's about knowing, with cold clarity, what you will do and when you will do it. When the rain had washed the last of my tears away, something clear settled in me. Grief had been a storm. Now it was time for strategy. I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't simply explode in front of him and expect justice. If I reacted the way my heart first wanted, he would twist it into another excuse, another tale where he was the victim and I the unhinged lover. No. If I wanted him to truly feel what I felt, I had to be smarter than his lies. I had to make the truth unavoidable. So I began to gather pieces. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Screenshots of messages, photographs of hidden moments, dates and times written down. Small things that meant nothing alone, but together would spell the story he had tried to hide. Every screenshot I saved told me more than words. I learned his patterns, the late-night texts that always started with a laughing emoji, the way he switched to secret apps when I walked into the room, the times he claimed to be at the office and was clearly somewhere else. I printed some messages. I saved voice notes. I took pictures, only when it was safe and public, of the cafe where he met her, the car he drove away in, the small necklace she wore that matched one I'd once seen him admire. I kept everything organized, a simple folder, like a file for a case I was building. I labeled them by date, by context, by weight. Because revenge, I decided, must be surgical. It needed facts, not fury. But facts alone aren't enough to wound someone who lives behind a crafted image. He had a reputation, polished, charming, respected by friends and family. If I simply confronted him in private, he could weave the same charm into his defense. If I shouted the truth at midnight, it would be dismissed as the ramblings of a wounded heart. So I turned my plan outward. I planned not just to show him what he'd done. I planned to expose the truth in a way that could not be softened by excuses. Public, clear, undeniable. Still, exposure was only half the goal. I wanted him to feel the same hollow silence I'd felt in the dark after finding the messages. I wanted him to taste the humiliation of being discovered, the emptiness of losing the stage he so carefully polished. I wanted him to understand the small betrayals, the late calls, the casual lies, as something that built into a mountain of deceit. So I practiced patience. I played the role he expected, the loving girlfriend, the woman who forgave and trusted. I smiled at him at dinner, kissed him in the hallway, whispered "I love you" the way I always had. To his face, I was still the girl who believed. Behind his back, I was a woman arranging the final pieces of his undoing. There were nights I felt like a fraud acting kind when I wanted to. Scream felt wrong in the bones, but that act gave me leverage. He relaxed around me. He loosened his guard. He continued to behave as though the world accepted the story he told, and that complacency became my advantage. Watched him with surgical curiosity. Where he hid his phone, who he called when he thought no one listened, which of his friends offered alibis and which looked away when I mentioned something offhand. Learned to read him not as a lover but as evidence, a human trail that led to the truth. Still, I kept morality in mind. There was no need to stoop into hatred that could harm me in the long run. No breaking into accounts. No threats. Only careful documentation, public truth, and the slow removal of his safe spaces. There were practical steps, too. I backed up conversations. I made copies of receipts showing where he'd told me he was and where he really was. I asked a few trusted friends, not for gossip but for corroboration. Their steady, quiet support calmed me. They reminded me why I wasn't doing this for revenge alone, but for my own dignity. While I built my case, I also rebuilt myself. Betrayal had hollowed me out, but it had left a core that was stubborn and fierce. I started to sleep earlier, to eat, to stand straighter, because no plan succeeds if you burn out before it unfolds. Exercised the small things, the routines that reminded me I was alive beyond his betrayal. Then came the part people rarely speak about. The morality of it. Is revenge cruel? Is it selfish? Will it make anyone better? I asked myself those questions more than once. In the quiet, I told myself this. I wasn't out for vengeance simply to hurt. I wanted the truth to be seen by those who had trusted him. My mother, my friends, the people who admired us. I wanted to protect others from the same hidden lies, and by making him pay a little attention to the consequences of his actions, I hoped it might teach him, or at least strip his mask away. Months passed. Little by little, my collection of proof became undeniable. I had messages with timestamps that matched his business trips. I had photos from public places, friends' testimonies, a calendar of dates that contradicted everything he'd told me. It all fit together like a puzzle I'd been forced to finish. And then I planned the moment, not a dramatic confrontation in a dark alley that was for movies, a quiet, precise reveal in a space where he had status and where people's eyes mattered to him. A place where his reputation would be seen clearly for what it was, and where his denials would have nowhere to hide. I rehearsed my calm. I rehearsed my words. I made sure my proof was arranged, accessible, and coherent. This wasn't about revenge that burned me too. It was about a finale where facts, not fury, took center stage. All the while I kept being gentle in public, loving in private, the role that let him relax and the woman who carried a folder heavier than any handbag. He continued to speak of the future, to make plans, to smile in front of our friends, and because he did, I knew my timing was right. On the surface, people would still think we were fine. But beneath the surface, I had built a plan that would not let him off so easily. I would not let him rewrite the story now that the truth was within my hands. When the time finally came, he would wake and find that the world had changed around him, not because I wanted to ruin a life for sport, but because the life he had crafted, a life built on lies and needed to be dismantled so the truth could breathe. I didn't crave his ruin. I craved my restoration. I craved the moment when I could look at my mother, my friends, and myself and say, this is what happened, not as a cry for sympathy, but as the calm, final unmasking of a man who had pretended to love me. And so I waited, patiently, coldly, purposefully, because the most dangerous thing someone who's been hurt can become is someone who's learned to plan, and I had learned well. Anniversaries have a way of softening people. They make you sentimental. They make you trust the ritual of celebration, and Daniel knew this. That was why he picked tonight, not because he loved me more now, but because he knew the script would keep everyone distracted. He had gone all out. Roses that smelled like something from a movie scene, a table laid with candles, a small string quartet tucked near the window, playing those slow songs that make the world feel like it's moving in the background. Champagne chilled, waiting to be poured. He moved through the room like a man who owns the story he's telling, laughing easily, touching shoulders, leaning in to whisper sweet things that used to mean everything to me. Friends smiled. My mother sat at the head of the table, proud and content. If you'd shown someone a snapshot of that night, they would have believed it was perfect. He thought he was in control. He thought his mask still fit. But this time, I was the one holding the strings. I had rehearsed this moment in my head so many times I knew the words before I spoke them. Not because I was cruel, but because I wanted to be precise, to be undeniable, to strip whatever charm he had left until there was only truth. Halfway through dinner, as the main course arrived and the conversation drifted to easy topics, I stood up. The quartet softened their music, sensing a pause. Candles flickered. Faces turned. I raised my glass. For a second, there was polite confusion, the gentle, "Oh?" that fills rooms when routine breaks. My mother's smile faltered. Daniel's eyes sharpened, the kind of look a man gives when he senses a scene changing. "Tonight," I said, voice steady even though my heart felt like a drum, "I want to celebrate honesty, truth, and love that is real." Silence swallowed the table. The air felt electric, the way a storm feels right before thunder. He blinked. His smile wavered. He mouthed, "What are you doing?" But his voice was small in the space between us. I had planned the reveal so it couldn't be brushed away. I had prepared something that would stand up to charm, to denial, to the rehearsed sorrow of a man used to spinning stories. I had a small tablet with a slideshow, messages, timestamps, photos, receipts. I had voice notes and screenshots and the careful notes I'd kept like evidence in a case. Each file was labeled, each image dated. I'd even included his own words, the ones where he'd promised forever, the ones where he'd said he loved me, time-stamped and paired against messages to someone else. I began, not with rage, but with calm. Calm is devastating in its own way. It allows the room to listen, to witness, to judge without me pleading for it. "Daniel," I said, looking him in the eyes, "do you remember last month when you told me you had to work late on Friday? Do you remember saying you would be home by midnight?" He swallowed. He nodded, shallow. Yes, I tapped the tablet. A message popped up. Time, place, the sweet little emoji he used when he was speaking to her. The room watched the words appear. The faces around us changed color. One by one, I revealed everything. First, the messages. Texts that started casual, became intimate, then full-blown plans and confessions. Messages where he wrote things to someone else that he had once written to me. Messages where he used pet names, promises, jokes that were mine before they were hers. Then the photos. Photos taken in places I'd been told were work dinners. Photos of him laughing with that other woman. Of the two of them close enough that the world around them blurred. I had a picture of the small cafe where I'd watched them. Proof he had been there. I had a receipt showing he'd bought matching bracelets for them the day I'd celebrated his birthday. Little details that, when strung together, made it impossible to deny. I spoke slowly, each revelation a measured weight placed on the table. I let people look, let them feel the slow collapse of the story they'd believed in. I didn't accuse with wild eyes. I narrated like someone reading a report. That was the cruelty and the mercy of it. I gave them the truth and let it speak for itself. Gasps filled the room, soft at first, then louder. My mother reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled. Friends exchanged looks that felt like verdicts. The quartet's music faded into the background, powerless against the sound of the truth. Daniel's face changed through stages, confusion, anger, then a kind of raw panic. He tried to speak. He reached for me, not to steady me, but to control the scene. "This isn't," he started, voice breaking with an attempt at indignation. "You don't know the whole story." But the facts were already exposed. That's what made his words useless. Denial couldn't revive timestamps or unsent messages. Charm couldn't erase photographs. His rehearsed sorrow, the lines he might have used later, would have sounded hollow now that witnesses had the evidence in front of them. He scrambled for an explanation that sounded credible to others and to himself. He stuttered through half-truths and blame, suggesting misunderstandings, insisting those messages were harmless. He tried to twist the narrative the way he always had, paint himself as confused, overworked, a victim of circumstance. People began to turn away. Friends who'd laughed with him earlier looked stunned and then distant. My mother's eyes were rivers of pain and disbelief. She had loved him as her son-in-law before she knew him as a liar. I watched him search the room for an ally and find none. That realization, that he had no stage left to perform on, angered him. His voice rose. "Who put this together?" he demanded, desperate. "Who dared?" My voice cut through, flat and quiet. "I did." It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a hysterical accusation. It was the finality of someone closing a file and placing it in front of those who mattered most. The room absorbed it like a physical blow. He went paler. His hands shook. Pride, which had been his armor, fell away like a costume. He tried to bargain. "Let me explain," he pleaded. "I can make this right." His mouth sought mine, then my mother's, as if the touch of family could rewrite history. But the moment for making things right had long passed. The good stories had been told, the promises made. The lies had multiplied until they suffocated the truth. There was nothing left for his explanations to latch onto. People began to leave. Some stood rooted, speechless, deciding whether to stay or to choose sides. I watched them drift away like leaves from a tree that had been shaken too hard. My mother came to me and wrapped me in an embrace that was more apology than comfort, as if she was saying sorry for having believed in him. Daniel tried one last desperate move, to shame me, to cast me as unstable. He raised his voice, pointed at me, and accused me of orchestrating a public scene for attention. It was pathetic, and it made him smaller than he already was. No one took him seriously. No one wanted to. When the room finally emptied to the important people, the ones who mattered, the witnesses who would carry this truth into the days ahead, He sat down like a man who had been stripped to his bones. Pride and power drained from him. His image collapsed not in a single dramatic blow, but in the slow, merciless recognition that the life he'd curated was a lie. I had wanted him to feel the hollow I'd felt. I wanted him to taste a fraction of the humiliation and exposure. I wanted people who had trusted him to see the man behind the mask. In that moment, as his shoulders sagged and his mouth finally fell silent, that wish was fulfilled. He lost his pride, his power, his image, the things he'd used to charm and manipulate. My revenge was not fireworks or violence. It was a surgical public unveiling. It was truth laid bare in a place where his reputation mattered most. And as I looked at him, the man who had pretended to love me, I felt something like closure. It didn't feel triumphant like in books. It didn't erase the nights I had cried or the months I'd spent stitching myself back together. But it felt right. It felt like justice in its purest, quiet form. He sat there, small and exposed, watching as people processed him anew. For the first time, he was the one who had to live with his actions under the clear light of day, rather than hiding behind rehearsed smiles in the dark. When the last of the guests left, when the candles had burned low and the string quartet were packing up in the doorway, my mother squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Not because I had destroyed him, but because I had reclaimed my voice and my dignity. The night closed with rain tapping at the windows. The same rain that had once washed my tears, now a quiet witness to an ending. I walked away from the table knowing nothing could bring back what had been lost. But I also knew that I had stopped being the person who let lies rule her life. My revenge was complete. Walking away from him wasn't easy. You would think that after everything, after the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, that leaving would feel like a victory march, but it wasn't. Because love, even when it's fake, even when it's poisoned, leaves scars. It clings to your memories. It lingers in the corners of your mind. And it whispers, "But remember the good times?" For days after that night, I carried those whispers with me. The sound of his laugh, the warmth of his hand, the little rituals we had built together. They weren't real, not anymore. But they had felt real once. And that made the healing harder. The first morning I woke up without him in my life, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. There was silence in the room. No footsteps, no phone buzzing with excuses, no fake smile greeting me with half-hearted affection, just silence. And for a moment, that silence scared me. It felt like emptiness. But slowly I realized it was freedom. Every step I took away from him made me lighter. Every mile between us made me stronger. Every day without his lies made me freer. Of course, people asked questions, friends, neighbors, even family, curious voices that wanted to understand. "Don't you regret it?" they asked. "Don't you wish you had never met him?" And my answer surprised even me. "No," I said. "I don't regret it, because through his betrayal, I discovered something I would have never found without him. My own strength. Through his lies, I learned the priceless value of truth. Through his fake love, I found the courage to love myself. He didn't just break me, he forced me to rebuild. And in rebuilding, I became someone stronger than I ever imagined. I began to see the world differently. Simple things felt brighter. The morning sunlight, the sound of rain, the smell of coffee. Because now I was living for me, not for the version of me he had shaped. I started journaling again, pouring my thoughts onto paper, unfiltered and raw. Every page became a mirror, reflecting my pain, my healing, my rediscovery. Some entries were full of tears, some of anger, but slowly. More and more were filled with gratitude. Gratitude that I had survived. Gratitude that I had found the truth. Gratitude that I had walked away. Healing wasn't linear. There were nights I still cried, wondering how someone could look me in the eyes and pretend so perfectly. There were mornings I woke up with memories that felt like ghosts. There were moments I almost picked up the phone, almost let the cycle repeat, but each time, I reminded myself, I didn't walk through the fire just to go back into the flames. I had scars to prove I'd survived, and scars aren't weaknesses, they are reminders of strength. Slowly, I built myself back up. I spent time with the people who loved me for real, friends who stayed up late just to listen, my mother who held me through my silence, even co-workers who checked in with small kindnesses that meant more than they knew. I took long walks in the park, feeling the wind against my face, learning how to breathe again without carrying the weight of lies on my chest. I rediscovered passions I had set aside, books I had left half-read, songs I had forgotten. I loved dreams. I had paused for a man who never truly saw me. Piece by piece, I came back to life, and here's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak. It doesn't just break you, it reshapes you. It burns away the illusions you clung to and forces you to see yourself in a new light. I saw myself not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who stood up, exposed the truth, and walked away with her dignity intact. I wasn't weak, I wasn't naive, I was human, and I had turned my pain into power. Sometimes, I wondered if he ever thought about me, if he ever replayed that night in his mind, the night his mask fell in front of everyone. Did he feel regret? Did he feel shame? Did he wish he had chosen differently? Maybe, maybe not, but I realized it didn't matter anymore. His story was no longer mine to carry. His lies were no longer my chains. His choices were no longer my prison. I was free. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't always look like dancing in the streets or shouting in victory. Sometimes, freedom is quiet. It's the soft peace of waking up and knowing you don't have to question anyone's words. It's the relief of breathing without waiting for the next betrayal. It's the simple joy of choosing your own path without fear, without doubt, and that's what I found. Months passed. Seasons changed, and so did I. I no longer introduced myself as the woman who had been cheated on. Was the woman who had survived, the woman who had grown, the woman who had discovered her worth through the ashes of a broken love. I began to dream, again, of a future not tied to anyone else's, hires of a love that wasn't built on masks or performances, and most importantly, of a life where I was enough, just as I was one evening. As I sat watching the sunset, a thought came to me, soft, but powerful. Yes, he had betrayed me. Yes, he had shattered my trust, but in the end, he had given me a gift, not because of who he was, but because of who I had become after him. He showed me that I could walk through fire and still rise. He proved to me that my worth was never defined by his choices. He taught me that losing him wasn't a tragedy. It was liberation. So when people ask me again, don't you regret it? Don't you wish you had never met him? I smiled and I said, no, because without him, I wouldn't have discovered the strength I carry now. Without him, I wouldn't have learned to cherish truth as deeply as I do. Without him, I might never have found the courage to finally love myself. Love may have left me with scars, but scars aren't the end of the story. They are proof of survival. They are proof of strength. They are proof that even after the storm, I am still standing, and that is the real victory. Betrayal hurts. It cuts deeper than a knife, because the wound isn't on your skin. It's in your soul. It breaks you in ways words can't fully explain. It takes away not just trust in someone else, but for a while it steals your trust in yourself. But here's the part most people don't see. Sometimes, it's the pain that gives us the power to rise. When he pretended to love me, I believed him. Every smile, every word, every promise. I held them close to my heart like treasures I thought I had found forever. But his betrayal revealed a truth I couldn't ignore. And as much as it shattered me, it also opened my eyes. I realized something I had forgotten. My worth was never his to decide. My value was never tied to his attention, his words, or his lies. For so long I thought my revenge was about destroying him, about making him feel the humiliation, the emptiness, the brokenness that he had forced on me. But when the storm passed, when the truth came to light and his mask finally fell, I understood something far greater. My revenge was never truly about him. It was about reclaiming myself, because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it teaches. It shows you who someone really is. But more importantly, it shows you who you are. It teaches you how strong you can be when the ground crumbles beneath your feet. It teaches you the value of listening to your instincts, those whispers you once silenced out of love. It teaches you that no matter how carefully someone crafts their mask, the truth will always find a way to break through. And the truth is freedom. I used to wonder, why me? Why did I have to be the one betrayed? Why did I have to be the one broken? But now I see it differently. It wasn't a punishment, it was a revelation, it was life's way of pulling me out of a lie and setting me free. Because imagine if I had never found out. Imagine if I had lived my whole life with a man who wore a mask, who played a role, who never truly loved me. That would have been the greatest tragedy of all, so yes, betrayal broke me, but it also saved me. If you've ever been betrayed, I want you to remember this. You are stronger than the lies. You are greater than the pain. The scars you carry aren't signs of weakness. They are proof of survival. Proof that you were tested, and you endured. Proof that someone tried to break you, and yet, here you are, still standing. There's a strange beauty in betrayal, though it's hard to see at first. Because in losing someone false, you gain something real. You gain clarity. You gain freedom. You gain the chance to rebuild, this time on a foundation that's honest and unshakable. When I walked away from him, I thought I was losing everything, but the truth was, I was only losing the illusion. What I gained instead was myself. And here's what I've learned. No mask can hide the truth forever. It might take days, months, or even years. But eventually the lies fall apart. The performance slips. The cracks appear. And when they do, you'll see clearly, not just who they are, but who you are without them. And that moment, that's when the healing begins. I used to believe love was about holding on, but now I know sometimes the bravest kind of love is letting go. Letting go of lies, letting go of masks, letting go of the version of yourself that once believed you weren't enough. Because you are enough, you always were. And betrayal, as cruel as it is, forces you to finally see that truth. So when I look back now, I don't see a story of pain. I see a story of power. Yes, he lied. Yes, he betrayed. Yes, he pretended. But I rose, I found the truth, I reclaimed myself, and that's the real ending. So if you're listening to this, and you've been where I was and broken, betrayed, lost, you hear me now. You are not defined by the one who hurt you. You are not defined by their lies or their betrayal. You are defined by your strength, by your courage, by the way you rise when the world tries to keep you down. Because in the end, the truth always wins. The masks fall, the lies collapse, the betrayal is exposed, and when the dust settles, you'll still be standing, stronger, wiser, freer. That's what betrayal taught me. That's what set me free.